Afternoon, Brollies. Thank you for joining us for our fifth core series webinar. Arguably one of the most important factors to maintaining our personal well-being is good mental health. The uncertainty we face in our day-to-day lives can really take a toll on our mental health as it heightens our feeling of anxiety, stress, and grief. Mental health is often seen as a taboo subject, and many of us suffer in silence. Today, we focus on the importance of mental health and how exactly we can best cope with the uncertainties and stress we face in our everyday lives while still prioritizing our mental well-being. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Khanyile, a mental health ally who helps educate and empower people about raising awareness on the importance of mental health care through her work as a Vice President of Mental Matters. Having qualified as a medical doctor in 2015, after completing her Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery at Wits, Dr. Khanyile has certainly broken the mold of being a stereotypical doctor. Nominated as one of 2019 100 Most Influential Young South African in the Science and Technology category, Dr. Khanyile was named the winner of her category and placed 7th in the overall ranking. A love for children has been the driving force behind her decision to pursue a career as a pediatrician, currently practicing as a pediatric registrar. Dr. Khanyile, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We really look forward to dedicating some time today to focusing on some important topics around our mental health and hopefully walking away with some useful tips to maintain mental well-being. Over to you.
Good afternoon, Andile, and thank you so much to Brol for giving me this opportunity. I will be sharing my screen and I'm going to be speaking about something that I think a lot of us don't really know a lot about, considering that it's our own bodies that we are taking care of and we should be knowing everything about. It baffles me sometimes that as professionals, we're so good at making decisions in the workplace, but when it comes to ourselves, we don't really do the right thing. So what I've been asked to do is speak to you about why mental health matters and how we can incorporate that into our lives so that we're able to be more successful participants at our workplace and especially in our lives. So who am I? I'm Dr. Nogukhanya Khanyile. I'm by vocation a medical doctor. I qualified in 2015 and I was at the University of Witwatersrand. I then went on to do my internship at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital, moving to Sebokeng for my community service. And now I've decided to go into pediatrics. A lot of people ask me why not psychiatry? Well, I enjoy mental health in a healthy way and promoting health with children, seeing their resilience, and they are really the blueprint that I use for advocating for mental health. I am the vice president of an organization called Mental Matters, which we aim to destigmatize mental illness in society, but particularly youths and people working in significantly stressful situations, such as healthcare workers. And also, what we found now is people working from home, because we're unable to really separate the line that is between working and staying at home, because you're just at home all the time. You can just run over to your computer, pick up a young email, and that causes a lot of dysfunction for some people. So I'm going to try and help you break down those barriers. I use social media to advocate, for just health in general and wellness. And I use my platform to show people how that can be possible. So there's the logo, Mental Matters. We love having mental wellness conversations, and you can follow us on social media. I'll put the details at the end of this talk. But for today, we're going to be speaking about a few definitions. I find that with mental health, a lot of people know a little bit about it, but they're not really sure what I mean when I say what is a disorder, what is burnout, and we're going to go into those. We're going to speak about how mental health and physical health are equal to one another. One is not more important than the other, and how we can show destigmatization of mental health in workplaces can actually contribute successfully to you guys as a society and a company to go forward. And lastly, what would it be if I give you a talk without giving you tools and practical things that you can do in your own space today to make sure that you can practice mental wealth and health. So let's look at the definitions. Mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities. They can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and they're able to make a contribution to his or her community. So the World Health Organization in 2019, a year before COVID-19 came out, and we had the lockdown, put out this definition. And what I wanted to highlight to you is that already living in a country like South Africa, we must understand that there's so many abnormal things that we deal with. We deal with high crime rates. We have a lot of instability in terms of society, load shedding, etc. We have unemployment, job insecurity. So already based on just that, we don't meet the definition for mental health because we don't deal with normal stresses. We have abnormal stresses. Also, we're unable to work productively because when you have to deal with all these abnormal stresses, there's no electricity at home because you're load shedding. How can you contribute to your society and work productively? And also, you need to realize your own abilities. We have the advent of social media today, and we have what we call your KPIs in your setting, which can sometimes be unrealistic, particularly now working from home, where you're expected to be online at any time because you're at home, because you're not traveling to work all the time, because you're right by your computer anyway. It can be a lot of stress for some people, and people don't understand that having those boundaries set by your leaders at work is very important. And so we need to enforce that in our workplaces. But another important point is the next one, which is that health is not just the absence of mental disorder. It needs to be something, and I'll go into what that means. It means that we need to have dysfunction that is present, either in your personal, relational, physical environments. And sometimes, using depression, for example, there's a low mood that is persistent for 2 weeks. But if you're already feeling sad today, and to the point where you're actually feeling like, I might not be able to make it to tomorrow. You might not be suicidal as yet, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. And so, being the absence of a mental disorder does not mean that there isn't a problem. I would like you to think about some of the things that are leading you towards picking up signs of a mental disorder in your life. And this will lead me to the topic of burnout. Burnout, and I think a lot of people have heard about this, is a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress. Everybody on this call can agree. We all know what chronic workplace stress looks like. It could be emails. I shudder because sometimes I look at my husband's emails and he has hundreds of emails that are unread. I can't handle that, but that could be an example of chronic workplace stress. Deadline after deadline after deadline, meetings that you have to attend to, jumping on one call to another. It just goes on and on. So chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed, and we'll get into how you can manage that, and is characterized by 3 dimensions. 1, feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. Just think about this as I'm going along because you probably meet this criteria already. Second is increased mental distance from one's job. So that could be you just finding it difficult to get into the zone. That could be you feeling like you're lethargic during the day, being very distracted, unable to concentrate, and also feeling like what you're doing is not purposeful. And also reduced professional efficacy. So that could be you're unable to really bond with your colleagues the way you used to, you're lazy, you're late to meetings, things like that. So some people may say that someone is irresponsible, but for someone who works in my field, I can start seeing early that these are actually signs of burnout, and maybe you need to take a break. When we talk about mental disorders, they're a behavioral or psychological syndrome or pattern that reflects an underlying psychobiological dysfunction. And there are consequences of which are significant distress or disability. And I'd like to point out this because some people use the fact that the distress or disability is not significant, or they write it off and saying you're being weak or you're overreacting. Please take your mental health seriously, because if it is causing you distress, it's something that we may need to address quite early before it becomes too dysfunctional and too difficult to treat. It's not merely an expected response to common stresses and losses, and also results of social deviance or conflicts with society. So when we speak about that, we speak about how some African traditions versus Western traditions look at mental health in a different way, how people are expected to grieve or mourn, how people are expected to deal with stress, men versus women. So young people versus old people, you have to look at the context. And this is why mental health is so difficult to treat sometimes, because you might tell your parents that you're suffering and they might not believe you, but you actually are going through some significant distress for someone of your societal and social profile. So when I was asked to speak about this, I went onto the Bro website and I asked, myself a couple of questions. What are some of the things that are related to the core series? Why even name it the core series? And one of the things that popped up was that they said that they wanted to strengthen the core of the business, the employees. And so I want you to reflect at this time and think, what does being an employee mean for you? And if you have a piece of paper, you can write it down and answer the question later. And secondly, what does being a Bro employee mean for you? Because depending on that definition, that will make you meet or not meet the definition of mental health or wealth, that you feel you meet in this place. So if you look at the core of something, it's the part of something that is central to its, that is central to its character. So you cannot have a being without that core thing. And this, I think, is really an ode and a token to Bro to say they understand that its employees, its Brolies, are the core, and without you, they cannot function and they cannot be successful. So they already recognize how important you are. And a lot of organizations don't have that. So hats off to you guys. And I put a picture of sit-ups there because we always associate the core with that. And it just shows that sometimes it can be quite difficult to work on that. And I'm very glad that I'm able to share some of my information here. So let's talk about mental health and how important it is in relation to physical health. There's a book called The Happiness Advantage, which is the 7 principles of positive psychology, success, and performance at work. And they speak about what they did was they took a group of people who were suffering with depression. They took one group, gave them a third of them and gave them medication. The second third was given an exercise regimen of 7 minutes of exercise to do every day. And the third group was given a combination of both medication and exercise. And interestingly enough, the group that experienced or was given just medication experienced 38% relapse back into depression after 6 months. The group that had the combination showed that their depression relapse rate was 31%, but only 9% of the people that had physical activity alone relapsed into depression. And what that shows us is that exercise and physical activity can contribute to mental health and vice versa. Why? Because there's a variety of substances that play an important role in brain function. Substances such as BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, it's a protein that increases and protects your neurons. Your neurons are your nerve cells in your brain. And this allows you to transmit messages more frequently, more efficiently, and regulates depression-like behaviors. Endorphins, everybody knows about endorphins and dopamine, which are the feel-good hormones, but particularly endorphins are related to painful experiences. So when you experience pain or when you have a stressful experience, you increase your endorphins. And so what better way to increase it in a positive way than with exercise versus a negative way, like working on a stressful project or experiencing difficult working environments. It helps you really regulate negative effects and increases your pleasure throughout the body. When you feel good, you look good, and you can perform a lot better. Things like serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate and GABA are all neurotransmitters that are related to and can be affected by mental illness. So, for example, with depression, you release less levels of dopamine, or your brain becomes less sensitive to dopaminergic stimuli. And that's why exercise can actually be protective against depression. The benefits of physical activity, and these are really 4 important points that I want to go through. People think of physical activity as something that you have to do hard or fast. They see these physical trainers or these personal trainers doing hectic exercises, go hard or go home. And I want to destigmatize all of that. And please remember that it doesn't have to be excessive. If you look on the image on the left, just 1 hour of exercise a week is related to lower levels of mood, anxiety, and substance use disorders. Something like boxing can really help move the energy in terms of anxiety through you. People have been shown to have less anxious and anger temperaments when it comes to using exercise to release that emotion. If you look in the right, bottom right, for people with schizophrenia, which is a mental health disorder involved with psychosis, hallucinations, etc., yoga is the most effective form of exercise for reducing positive and negative symptoms associated with the disorder. Now, you might not have hallucinations, but you might have really difficult, anxious feelings. You might feel that there's a lot of things going on with you and you can't handle that right now. Yoga also helps release dopamine and endorphins so that you can feel a little bit more positive about handling your day. We'll move on to destigmatizing mental health now. Destigmatizing mental health is something that I really am passionate about, because I feel that once you are aware that there's a problem, you can ask for help. But if there's an environment that allows for that, sometimes the environment can see that there's a problem long before you do, and it can offer help a lot earlier before there's even a problem to pick up. And so this is why I love the fact that Brol has brought me on, so that I can make you and your employers, aware of what is happening. Mental health and stigma in the workplace affects 79% of female colleagues and 21% of male colleagues in the workplace. That's 59% of employees aged between 31 to 50. I'm not in that age group yet, but I work in the healthcare space, and I know probably about 80, this is completely random, but this is about 80% of my colleagues experience significant dysfunction. For those of you who manage other people, this is an important demographic, because it makes me stop and think, if someone who's a junior or someone who's below me in my team comes to me and says, I'm struggling, what is your response going to be? Or what would your response be if a colleague said that they needed help? And this is where a manager's response to disclosure is that 30% actually have negative responses. Things like, you're overreacting, you're trying to make excuses, you're just lazy. Positive or helpful responses: how can I help? Where can we improve your workload so that you can be able to handle the workload? And in different responses: let me know if you need anything. I'll be here if you need it. Not really offering any support, but also not shunning your colleagues. So these responses can be very important. And it's also important to know what you would do in that situation, because it could happen to either of us. What I found was this incredible statistic from Discovery Health, and the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, which showed that depression has a serious impact on the South African economy. It spoke about something called presenteeism versus absenteeism. Absenteeism would be where you are feeling ill or you're feeling burnt out and you decide not to go into work. But presenteeism is actually where you go to work, but you're not really contributing much, because you know that if you're not at work or you're not in the meeting, people might ask questions, or you might not get an income, etc. So if you look at that image, 190 billion rand was lost to presenteeism, which is attending work while you're unwell, versus 28 billion rand due to absenteeism, which is unscheduled absences from work. This is just from depression. We haven't added anxiety and mood disorders to this number. And so I would like to ask that employers and managers encourage people to really be able to say, I need help early, so that we prevent things like presenteeism and people contributing to society and to their employer, to their workplace in a negative way because they're just afraid of not being there. So how can we fix this? What is the holistic approach that one can take? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I want you to ask yourself, where is your health at this point? You want to strengthen the core. And I asked this question in relation to what the core is. You want to strengthen the core of the business, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your psychological health. How does that core become stronger in your life? We're different. People have different backgrounds. People have different experiences. People have different realities. What might work for me might not work for you. As a woman versus a man, as a younger person, as an older person, there's different expectations on us. So we can't expect mental health to be a blanket rule. The part of something that is central to its being or its character. What is unshakable in your life? What is a non-negotiable in your life? For me, for example, it would be family time. There's one thing I will not negotiate around, and that is family time. I can slack a little bit on physical activity, or I can slack a little bit on TV time or social media time, but family time is a non-negotiable. What are those non-negotiables in your life? So that even with work, you know that you are able to work around that and not the other way around. Before I go on to the next topics, what I'd like is if anyone has any comments or any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box, or you can pop them in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the talk. So let's look at them. There was an interesting article I saw that spoke about 10 scientific ways to be happy. And in our practice, we learn about something called a biopsychosocial approach. So we look at your biological, which is your physical health, your psychological, which is your mental health, but also your social health, which is your interpersonal health. How do you relate to the people you work with, or even the people that you live in the house with, family and friends? And so we look at the biological health. Everybody knows these. We try to run away from them, but they're hard and fast rules that we cannot get away from. Exercise, eat well, sleep well. And another one that was interesting is going outside. Let's start with exercise. I spoke about it earlier on, but studies have shown that 7 minutes of exercise every day is all you need. If you can do more, that would be great. If you can do just at least 7 minutes every day, that is shown to improve negative responses to your mood or stresses that happen in your life. What does exercise look like? People think you have to go into the gym, you have to get the summer body right before you can exercise. It doesn't have to be like that. If you live in a complex or you live in an area that's safe enough, going for a walk around the block. Take the kids with you, play with them, play hide and seek or play catch with the kids if you can. Especially because of the fact that we're working from home these days, it's a lot easier for us to spend that quality time because we basically knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. 1, we get to spend time with our family, and 2, we get to exercise. Exercise could be a full yoga session, it could be running, going to the gym, etc. Anything that you feel can get your heart pumping for 7 minutes. Sleeping. The average adult needs between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I personally have such a stressful job, so I try to get in about 9 hours of sleep a night, and people are actually surprised because they think I don't sleep. But what I do is make sure that I utilize my time effectively so that when I do sleep, I can rest well. I also try to speak to myself before I go to bed and answer all the questions or write down all the questions I have in my head so that when I'm falling asleep, I don't have them sitting in the back of my mind, causing me to be more and more anxious, making it more and more difficult to sleep. If you're unable to get, 7 to 9 hours, what I would suggest is maybe even taking a nap during the day. As adults, we have 90-minute sleep cycles. So what that means is when you start falling asleep, you go from stage 1 down into stage 4 and back up into stage 1 sleep. The reason you need to move through those sleep cycles is because, one, your body needs to repair itself physically. Two, all of the work and all of the information you've taken through the day needs to consolidate itself into your mind. And three, you actually get better responses to pain when you sleep more. There have been studies that shown that the negative emotions related to pain were more heightened when people were sleep deprived versus the positive emotions related to pain. So you will remember a painful experience more positively if you are more well rested. And for someone who is on the verge of depression or suicidality, that extra 2 or 3 hours of sleep can be incredibly life-saving. For someone who has anxiety and fears going into work situation, those sleep hours can be incredibly relieving, because then you don't feel so anxious about the situation. You remember more of the positive things. My boss was smiling at me. I received good feedback versus I couldn't hear anything because my heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't speak because my mouth was so dry, etc., etc. And go outside. If you're lucky enough to live in a place where you can walk outside, it's not too full. Studies have shown that 13.9 degrees is actually the perfect happiness temperature. I don't agree with that because that's incredibly cold, but it's shown to be more refreshing. Going outside means that you get, one, a change of scenery. You're secondarily removing yourself physically from a stressful environment such as working at your desk. So you're already able to have a fresh point of view. But three, it actually helps improve your creativity, because when you're walking away, you're giving yourself and your brain a break, so that all that brain fog, all of that stress that's clogging your creativity can actually melt away, and you're able to have a different view of looking at a problem. So I always do that whenever I'm doing presentations or whenever I'm trying to study something. When my brain gets too overwhelmed and I find myself reading the same sentence over and over again, I just step outside, even for 5 minutes, breathe in the air, and then come back. And I find that actually makes me feel a lot better. So those are the 3 biological things that you can do to make yourself not only be happier, but improve your mental health. The next thing is the psychological. And I actually found that people think that happiness is more of a money thing, but what we found is all of these things contribute more. I'll start on the right, which is moving closer to work. Now, people would think that as long as I have a nice car or a nice house, it shouldn't be a problem. I can live a little bit further away from work and I'll be fine. But studies have shown that actually you're always going to be having to travel to work, whether you live close or far. But you're going to deal with traffic. You're going to deal with taxi drivers in South Africa. You're going to deal with accidents. There's going to be robots that are not working or traffic lights that are not working. And while we're actually working from home, when they say move closer to work, what they're saying is you need to make the commute to work more enjoyable. So the shorter it is, the less rushed you are in the morning and the less pressure you feel to make sure that there's no unplanables on the way. When that happens, you find that you arrive to work in a better state. And so you feel better. Your day goes better. You come home in a better mood. Your family doesn't annoy you as much because the commute back home is less stressful and shorter, and you're able to have a better experience. If you're working from home, it's important to make sure that you do have time where you separate work from home. So switch off the computer, and employees, please make sure that you tell your managers, I am going off. I am not going to answer emails from 6 o'clock because I have those non-negotiables that I spoke about earlier on. Meditation. Meditation has actually been shown scientifically to improve your mental health overall. Why? Especially for people with anxiety, is because you're able to center yourself and ground yourself in the now, in the reality. With anxiety, you find that there are a lot of fear-driven thoughts, and fear is the worry about something that hasn't happened yet. So meditation brings you into the now. It grounds you into the present and helps you melt away those anxious thoughts. There's incredible apps that you can use for meditation, one of them being Headspace. It's an app that you can use so that people can share, it shares tools and tricks that you can use, shows you how to meditate. It spends about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 45 minutes. You can adjust the amount of meditation you want, but it's really, really helpful. Also, planning a trip, even if you don't take one, or planning an activity, even if you don't do it, has been shown to improve your mood, because that anticipation of doing the thing or going on the trip actually makes you feel better. Practicing gratitude journals, gratitude jars, speaking it into existence actually helps you realize what you do have and makes you grateful for what you do have, so that you don't really feel so bad about the things you don't have right now. And lastly, practice smiling. I'd like everybody to please, and I'm going to take my glasses off, look into the mirror at some point and smile with your eyes. So don't just smile, but smile. Close those eyes, because your brain doesn't know the difference between a fake smile and a real smile. And sometimes you also think that you look a little bit silly, so you'll just end up laughing at yourself in the mirror. Practice smiling. It's also related to decreasing pain, not just in physical pain, but emotional pain. And lastly, we'll speak about the socials. Spend time with your family. A study was done that showed that 78% of people's biggest regret was not making more money. It was not spending enough time with their family or their friends. Spend time with your loved ones. And this is a big one for me, because I know that I work 240 hours a month. That time that I spend with my family and friends is precious to me, because I can never get it back. I encourage you to do the same thing, even if it's 30 minutes a day, whether it's a video call or if it's physical time where you sit and talk about your day. Even if it's super awkward, it'll help build those relationships. And lastly, help other people. Helping others 100 hours a year is kind of the rule. I obviously do that in like a half a month, but helping others has been shown to increase your mood, because you feel like you're contributing to society and you're purposefully doing something with your life. You're contributing to something bigger than yourself, and that actually helps. So you can do anything. Donate some money or supplies to your local charities, or even helping out a family member or a friend who needs something from you. So my take-home message is the absence of a disorder could still mean dysfunction. Just because you haven't been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, does not mean that there isn't a problem that is probably very easy to fix. Beware of habitual burnout, which is where you have chronic workplace stresses over and over again that are not dealt with. And that's leading to dysfunction over and over again. Mental health, just like physical health, is exercise. And while exercise can be exhausting in the beginning, the more you do, the better you get at it, the stronger you become, and the more you can take on. So I urge you to practice it day by day. You can't do 50 sit-ups on day one. So we can't expect ourselves to sit and meditate for a full hour. Take it slow. Be easy with yourself. Remember, presenteeism is more detrimental than absenteeism. So make sure that when you're there, you are present, you're able to contribute successfully to whatever it is you're doing. And if not, speak to the people around you and ask for help. And use those 10 biopsychosocial tools today. From moving, walking outside, sleeping more, exercising more, even if it's just for 7 minutes a day, helping people, smiling, practicing gratitude. All of those things are important to help you with your mental health. If you want to get in touch with me, my handle on social media platforms is at Dr_Kanyile, or you can email me on the address that you see on your screen. And I want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Brolies, for your time. And I will be taking questions at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Kanyile. That was absolutely amazing and greatly appreciated. It's such a pleasure to find time to sit down and focus on our mental well-being, something we often forget to do. I've got some questions, if you wouldn't mind answering them. Our first one's quite a lengthy one. Question is, it's concerning that in this day and age, that challenges with mental health are still being stigmatized. What type of stigmatizing do you come across in the work that you do? And what can you advise Brolies to help destigmatize mental health challenges?
Sure. Okay, so let me take the first one. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. So the kinds of stigmatization that I see in my workplace, being a mental health provider, is mostly related to performance. We're very high functioning. We don't want to be seen as letting down the team. We also don't want to be weak because you are smart, you qualified well, you are a pillar of society. So we find that people are they are feeling a lot of shame and guilt when they have these mental health challenges because they're seen as being weak, or they think they're going to be seen as being weak. What we find is that, especially with our junior doctors, they're so excited that they burn out very easily, very quickly, and they get into that cycle of habitual burnout. So what we urge people to do is from the beginning, we give people, when we set out the schedule for the month or the roster for the month, everybody gets requests. Because, as you know, everybody might have an event that they need, so that you're able to block out that weekend. The second thing we do is regular check-ins, and it will depend on the person that you're working with. But I love checking in with my interns. Are you sleeping enough? Are you saving money? Because people also forget financially that can cause stress for you. Are you making sure that you're eating well? When we're on call together, we try to all eat together, because it means that one, all of the work is done, and two, we make sure our bodies are nourished and our minds are nourished, and we can all just kind of check in with each other during those moments. There's a long list of things that I try to incorporate, but I think those are the two big ones, is trying to make sure we prioritize everybody's needs in a month, and secondly, is checking in with each other as regularly as we can.
Wonderful. Let me just check on our queue. I know that we've got some Q&A questions. We've got a comment, somebody saying, thank you for a great session. Another question is, seeking help for mental health can be quite costly. What alternatives can people seek other than self-help?
That's a brilliant question, because mental health can be quite expensive in the country. But firstly, medical aids do cover mental health in this country. Secondly, burnouts can be taken off. If you are diagnosed with burnout, you can get sick leave for burnouts. It doesn't have to be full on depression or anxiety, for example. So you can find help with regards to mental health in any shape or form. So in South Africa, we have accessibility to free healthcare services. So you could go to a local clinic or even your GP and ask them to refer you to counselors, social workers, or psychologists. So those are people who are not necessarily doctors, but and what will happen is you will be put in touch with maybe a counselor. They'll do a quick questionnaire or they'll do a quick interview, and they'll see at what level of help or support you need. And then they'll refer you appropriately, so that you're not necessarily spending 1,500 Rand per session to see a psychologist. You maybe just need a little bit of counseling or debriefing. People also can get help from religious centers. So for example, with me, I have a spiritual parent that I speak to. Other people may go straight to, the religious leader itself, but also community groups, cell groups, etc. You can find support there. For children or for people who are in schools, there are a lot of groups. The life orientation teacher, you can ask for help there as well. And there might be counselors there in the school. And lastly, even just going to your local community center, asking, do they have a counselor there, or do they have someone I can speak to, which is usually completely free. So you don't necessarily just have to go to a healthcare center like a doctor or a psychiatrist or psychologist. You could get help at various levels. But please don't count the people in your life. Your family and your friends are surprisingly intuitive, because they also know you. So they'll be able to give you a lot of insight, and maybe just listen, because maybe that's just what you need.
Wonderful. Thank you. There's another question. Surely we all feel more down on some days than others. What are the signs that we need to look out for in ourselves and in others to know that we need to make a step up and intentionally start caring for our mental health? So what do we need to start looking out for, I think, in a nutshell?
So I'm going to use the biopsychosocial approach again. Biologically, when you look at things like your appetite, are you eating a lot, or are you eating not enough? And when I say not enough, it means a baseline from your normal. So I have a friend who hates chewing. So if she has a smoothie for breakfast, that's like great. The next time she'll eat is dinner. But for me, I have to eat like 5 meals a day. That's my baseline. So you must know what your normal is. Is your weight increasing or decreasing? without any effort. So not related to your eating patterns. Are you sleeping more or less? So hypersomnia, you're sleeping more than usual, less than usual, insomnia, or struggling to fall asleep? Are you feeling palpitations? Are you having anxiety? Do you feel like, and I want people to understand a panic attack is not as benign as everyone thinks it is. You actually do feel like you're dying. And I've seen many times where people have walked in and they were having a panic attack, but they feel like they're having a heart attack. We have to do tests, we have to do x-rays, ECGs, etc., to make sure that everything is healthy and normal, because the way that they're presenting to us can look quite hectic. Psychologically, we speak about like a feeling of sadness that you just can't shake. And also you're unable to find joy in things you used to before. So for me, that would be the minute I see my mom, like I'm fine. But when I see my mom now, am I not able to be as happy? Am I not excited anymore? It's an inability to improve your mood no matter what you do. And that's why you find some people turning to substances. So are you finding a dependence on those substances? And it's not just a, oh, hi, Chomi, I need a drink. It's a, if I don't get a drink now, I think I'm going to collapse.
Right.
Okay, you need that thing to open your eyes at night. And then socially, are you finding that you're more irritable with your colleagues? Are you more snappy with your family and friends? Are you actually fighting? You're unable to resolve those relationships, not because anything happened, but because you're just angry or you're just too sad. And importantly, are you isolating? So are you wanting to stay on your own a lot more, to the point where you don't want to see people? Are you having thoughts that I shouldn't be here, the world would be better off without me? Those are questions that really are red flags.
Wonderful. I've got one more question for my Q&A, and it has to do with the infographic that you shared earlier from Discovery. And they noticed that the date is from 2017. Do we have anything that's more up to date to compare, especially because that obviously in 2017 it was pre-COVID, and now we're dealing with COVID matters?
So it's a little bit more difficult now because people are working from home. So we haven't had stats with regards to presenteeism and absenteeism. But they have seen that because of the working from home, burnout has increased. I don't have the exact number, but the South African Depression and Anxiety Group did release a document that spoke about burnout levels increasing, depression increasing, and the number of calls to their helpline is actually going up. I can find that stat and share it with you when I find it.
Wonderful. I think that was the last of the questions that we had from our end. Let me just check again if there's anything from our chats. Oh, we do have a question. With the feeling of being sad, how long does one have to feel like this? And I think that's all we have from Anonymous. They haven't really expanded on what that feeling of sadness is. But how long does one have to feel like this is what they're asking.
So that would depend on you, but for the diagnosis of depression, you need to feel that way for at least 2 weeks in a row in a period of 6 months. So that's a long time for you to actually meet the definition of depression. But that period of 2 weeks in a row means that you cannot shake this feeling of sadness, no matter what you do. It's very important also to differentiate it from someone going through a post-traumatic stress disorder or grief or mourning, because that when it's related to a big life event, we need to make sure that you're not actually going through that process versus depression. Depression would be the low mood, as well as the eating, the appetite, all of those changes I spoke about, whereas the mourning is related to that event and is transient. It usually passes.
Okay, so it's that sadness that's inexplicable that you need to worry about.
Yes.
We've got one more question. I think we've got time for the question.
Sure.
I sleep 7 hours a day, but I hardly get up to 2 hours. Oh, I sleep 7 hours a day, but I hardly get up to 2 hours deep sleep, except on weekends. What can I do to start enjoying deeper sleep during the week?
So I'm a new mom, and I've actually learned a lot about sleep recently because I've been trying to train my baby to get her to sleep. And so what I've realized is that we don't treat sleep the way we do for ourselves, like we do for children. So we need to actually mimic what we do for them. The one thing I learned is create an environment that cultivates sleep. So when you feel more relaxed and you prepare your brain to sleep, you will sleep deeper. Switch off the TV, stop social media or any videos that can stimulate you on your phone, get into quiet lighting, play some nice relaxing music. If you need to take a bath, don't have coffee at night. If you need to, don't have green tea, have like a rooibos tea or something with not caffeine in it, and do something that really you enjoy. Do activities in bed so that your brain gets ready for sleep. And then when you sleep, sleep in a dark, quiet room. So if you need to buy blackout curtains, do that. And try as much as you can to put your phone on do not disturb or flight mode so that you're not looking every 2 minutes whenever it pings or it lights up or anything like that. And then the last thing is the weekends. What's the factor that you don't have is work. So is work the thing that's keeping you up and preventing you from deep sleep? So like I said, before I go to bed, any thoughts I have or any worries I have, I write down in a journal. So then at least I know, okay, these are the things I'm going to deal with in the morning. I can't deal with them now because I have to sleep. There's nothing I can do about it. So write them down on your phone in a note or in a journal or something, and then you'll deal with it in the morning. Just writing it down gets it off your mind, and you'll be able to deal with it better. Hopefully, you'll be able to sleep better.
Dr. Hangile, that was absolutely wonderful. I think that's the last of the questions that we had today. We are going to start smiling, not just with our lips, but with our eyes as well. Thank you so much for today. In closing, I would like to extend a big Brolly thank you to you for affording us your time. And just a reminder to all the Brollies out there that we'll have our next session of the course series next Tuesday, same time, same place. Until next time, remember, we are all in this together, even though we're apart. Take care and goodbye.